It's the Mike Buck Show, right here on AM 690 and FM 94.3. The Answer.
It's Aloha Friday, no work till Monday. On the Mike Buck Show. What you gonna do right now? Son is rush in the house. Well, you know, like they say, whoever they are, aloha kakahiaka, good morning, and welcome to the Aloha Friday version of the Mike Buck radio program. Yesterday morning, we told you all about a very, very historic moment that happened in the Pentagon. As a matter of fact, at no time ever, according to the Missile Defense Advocacy Alliance webpage this morning, there's no time in the history of our country that the United States Vice President, the Secretary of presented together the need for expansion of missile defense. No stranger to our program over the last decade. I think this is one of the most monumentous times that I can remember. Only because it seems like the planets have lined up for us to understand the importance of being the dominant force in defense rather than offense. Riki Ellison, the founder and CEO of Missile Defense Advocacy Alliance, was in the Pentagon yesterday for this, I guess, the lining up of the planets, one of the most important events that's taken place in a long, long time in missile defense. Hey, hello there, Ricky. Am I right? Was yesterday one of the biggest moments in our collective lives about missile defense?
About missile defense. I think the Reagan speech would be the other one. This is the first time we've had the President, the Secretary of Defense, the Vice President, all together compelling the argument to expand our mission to go beyond North Korea, beyond Iran, to defend each of our cities, including Honolulu, against all missile threats that face our nation from anywhere, any place, at any time. Very strong words.
Here's one thing that I thought was really important. When you mentioned Reagan, that was in the Star Wars days, but nobody really knew much about it. Technology advanced so much, even kids in grade school know about satellites and interception in space and all that stuff. So I think we're a little bit more in tune with it. But isn't this also a very important moment to realize that while we've been sitting here on our haunches for the last while, some of our potential enemies are developing rocketry and missiles that go a lot faster than the other stuff, and we were behind the eight ball on that.
Yeah, that was mentioned directly by the Secretary of Defense, who said that there are over 20 nations, or 20 nations today, that are proliferating ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, that are unrestrained, and they're doing this more than building ships or buying planes or tanks. This is the weapon of choice. So that proliferation is tremendous. And then both the near-peer threats, the great power threats of Russia and China, have created technologies to beat our missile defense systems and creating capabilities to upset our ability to defend ourselves.
You've told me in the past, and I really grasp the hold of this, and I hope our listeners do, that it used to be sometimes it was the money, and some of these upstart countries that were a ideological threat to us didn't have the money to get into the game. But some of the other countries that we're not so friendly with appear to be discerning this. Is it less expensive to build this stuff, or are there more people that are willing to provide the bad guys?
You're seeing our evolution on commercial space launch.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be much cheaper to launch more stuff as the future goes forward. But having missiles is much cheaper. I mean, it could be 10, 20 times cheaper, more than that, than having a fourth-generation aircraft or a fighter. So you got to pay, train pilots, upkeep, maintain. This is the poor man's Air Force. And this is the most affordable way to project power, to politically intimidate other countries or other nations that you're at odds with or see them as threats. So this is where the world's going I mean, you can't stop it. Nobody's been able to stop it. There's no treaties that are stopping it. It is going, and the nuclear part of it, the new technologies are going to be transferred very quickly. And China and Russia are pursuing this. And the hypersonic one, which I know we've talked about in the program, it's sort of like skimming a rock over a pond.
Mm-hmm.
Unpredictable as it bounces around. It's like, think of it going through the atmosphere like that, and then all of a sudden it drops in at 20 Mach and maneuvers into the target. So they don't have to do a ballistic trajectory. They're doing that. And the United States had created our ability to do hypersonics, 30 years ago, but we felt that we shouldn't do it anymore because it would destabilize our security in our environment with a great power. So we shelved it. And then all of a sudden, both Russia and China have jumped on this thing, last 10 years, and have excelled at it. And we now have to go back, and it's there, and we're going to go back and have to compete with them. We're going to have hypersonic glide vehicles and hypersonic cruise missiles to compete, and we're going to have to create defenses for those systems, which we do not have today.
There is the bottom line, isn't it? And I think there's still a lot of people, Ricky, that are confused between, offensive and defensive weaponry, and that maybe it looked to me at least with the Secretary of Defense, the President, the Vice President, all seeming to think, okay, we realize this is not a hard sell to the American people. This is not weapons. We're not building attacks. We're trying to protect ourselves. You almost got to draw a line parallel to the wall. I mean, the president promised a wall to protect ourselves. Isn't this what another degree of the protection?
No, this is. I wouldn't put that terminology on this at all. This is much bigger than the United States. We're protecting our allies.
Yeah, there you go. That's it. Yeah,
we're protecting our forward forces all over. We're protecting our global world. We're protecting the international rights of space, the international rights of sea passage, the international law that we're seeing being infringed on countries, great powers, that don't have a moral compass, that don't have, they're doing ethical things that we will never do. They're not playing by the rules.
Yeah, they have their own rules. I mean, whatever they are. But, you brought up a point. I never realized it until you said that. When you take a look at it and you look at the economics of it, providing our allies the strength and the protection that this is going to do is cheaper than having a whole bunch of soldiers and sailors and Marines all over the world doing that protection. You can do it with these things in silos rather than thousands of our young men and women.
But it's also important to realize that the president did make a strong point. He went through 6 policies, and his last policy yesterday was to demand burden sharing from our allies to support their own defense and our defense of them. And, there are the richest countries in the world that are our allies. They're not paying 1% or 0% that are not contributing. So we made that a very clear point. It's a team game. If you got a team defense, you got to have a team game. And this, again, like he said to our people, he is saying we are going to defend every city in this country against all missile threats.
There's actually this soundbite. I actually got this off the MDAA website, as well as a story in the local press, and the quote was a real quick one. It says, "Our goal is simple: to ensure we can detect and destroy any missile launched against the United States anytime, anywhere, anyplace." Isn't that great? We just I want to. There
should be no resistance to that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not killing anybody. Nobody in America. That's a win-win-win for everybody. So, and we need, and the problem has been is that since 1998, when we had the Missile Defense Act, and North Korea flew over Japan with a ballistic missile, we focused on creating technologies and missile defense systems to defeat that single threat. And we haven't shifted from that very simplistic ballistic missile threat with our ability to shoot it down to the reality of the complexity of maneuverable cruise missiles that come at 360 and over the horizon distances, hypersonic glide,
unbelievable
hypersonic
speed,
cruise.
unbelievable, isn't it?
So this is the historic turn that to expand our limited capability that we were doing, both presidential intent from both parties, policy restricted from both parties just to do that, and limited our development and testing and deployment of systems that you could just defeat that. So we're opening it up, and why we have to do this, and why should we not maximize the best systems we can build?
As a matter of fact, it's
everything.
It's no coincidence that Pompeo is meeting with a upper echelon delegation from North Korea today. I think that this is settling in around the world that all of a sudden the powers that be in the U.S. seem to be, instead of bickering with each other on something, agreeing with each other. I don't think there's a way that anybody can be against the proposal in the increase in this. Do you? I mean, is there any way that anybody logical?
Well, there is ways, and I think you're bringing up the old Star Wars group and arms control guys that think that this is destabilizing. This is a defensive system, number one, and it's given us security to be able to stabilize this world that is proliferating these systems that we can't control. And we cannot be held defenseless. We cannot be held with limited systems to defend our people. That's what we pay our taxes for, some of them.
Yep.
You know, a percent of our taxes is for the defense of ourselves from these type of threats. So I think China and Russia are going to push hard against it, obviously, because this thing now, they're going to have to compete with us. China may be able to compete with us. Russia can't. We'll break Russia.
We just can't. We'll break them. You know, that's another thing. Here's another thing. As we take a look at this going forward, we're looking right now at all of these things. We got all the things that are lining up correctly, and it doesn't seem like, now that it seems some agreement at the upper end, the job now is to sell each and every one of us to support this effort. Period.
Well, like you said, Mike, there's very few that would not want to have a defense of any missile threat coming at us. So I think that's a sole position. Now, we're probably doing, from my perspective, we've got the offense-defense mix in our regional capabilities, because that's where the hypersonic is regional right now. So that is where we're, those are the fundamental building blocks to build that regional defense and get that correct. I also think the other fundamental block that we are doing is this big space global sensor discrimination layer, with hundreds of satellites that can see everything and assess what it is, discriminate it, and be able to create a firing solution for that. That we have to get that up, because we can't be relying on terrestrial radars and sensors for that.
You know why? I'm glad you said
those
that.
Those are building blocks.
I'm glad you said that, because I'm glad you said that for a couple reasons. First of all, I don't think that most of our listeners, I had a tough time grappling with it until I really looked at it. When you say something is hypersonic, we're talking about, everybody knows that that's the speed of sound. The acceleration of these...
I'm talking about 20 times the speed of sound.
I can't... I'm having a tough time wrapping my head around that. That's really, really fast.
It is.
And so what you're saying is, and this is what I heard from the president, is this system, arguably, is going to be, no matter what comes from where, in a very short period of time, we have the opportunity, should we deploy these things in enough places, to knock any threat down, bottom line.
But Mike, we don't have the defense today to defeat those.
Yeah,
you understand
that's what I mean. But how?
So
what's the road to that?
What's that?
What's the road to that? How quickly can we not only
the road just started today.
Yeah.
You have a president and a DOD that's changed its policies to be able to go get that. That's what happened yesterday.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't know, Ricky, since we've known each other on this subject, that there's ever been a more positive event than yesterday, period.
No question. And there are some new technologies that we've been developing that I just want to, that are on the cusp. They're not 10 years away from here. They're not billions of dollars. They're right with us. And the ones I'm excited about is the F-35 that we've already paid for. And I think there's 1,000 already out there. There's going to be 5,000 of them out there with their allies that can do kinetic air-to-air boost phase intercept. So they're going to be able to have standoff range and shoot a ballistic missile in its boost phase the first 300 to 500 seconds.
It's unbelievable.
That's something we're going to have very quickly. And that's something also that those things can do is sense and give us 360-degree sensor of any kind of missile that will be fed back for other firing solutions. So that's one thing that's not, it's here. It's very close.
Okay, now
the other one.
Go ahead. Yeah, the other one. That's what I'm.
The other one is what we tested in your state last month, and that was the SM-3 Block 2A missile that you and I have talked about. That was co-produced by Japan. That will have an ability to shoot down the ICBM missile, the nuclear long-range missile, and it can be mobile, and it can be sea-based, land-based. And we're looking to produce hundreds of them.
Yeah, and
so
you talked also,
right now. What?
Ricky, you also talked about the economy of that. The economy of it is that here's a technology that it's not only that we can't afford not to use it, because not just does it save a lot of money.
We've already paid for it.
We've already paid. That's what I said. We already own it.
And those SM-3 missiles are probably 1/3 to 1/4 of the GBI missiles.
Wow.
Now I'm going to tell you something else, Mike. In this MDR, as you and I have always been pushing for a better defense for Hawaii. They've listed that. You want me to read you that? What's in that MDR on that?
Yeah, exactly.
So they said a repurposing option is to operationalize either temporarily or permanently the Aegis Ashore Missile Defense Test Center in Kauai, Hawaii, to strengthen the defense of Hawaii against North Korean ballistic missile capabilities. DoD will study this possibility to further evaluate it as a viable near-term option to enhance the defense of Hawaii. This is what we've been moving on.
Yeah,
that's what.
Since day one.
That's right. We weren't allowed to do this. Yeah. This is in writing now. This is in the NDR.
Well, I for one am really excited about it, and I don't know that we could have finished. It's been a very difficult couple of weeks for the whole country, with the partial shutdown right now and everything else. It was so nice to see some sort of a phoenix arriving out of the ashes yesterday with that meeting. I was so impressed, and you must have been feeling very honored. I mean, you were with a very eclectic group of people that are really decision makers, and this is going to set the pace, for the future.
I was extremely honored. The Secretary of Defense invited me to this event, and I was in the first row with our key decision makers on it.
Isn't that
it's 38 years, and we go back to, like I said, back to Reagan's 83 speech. This is real. Then this is going to be implemented, and this is what we've been fighting for, to open up our aperture to be able to take on all threats, all missiles, and defend every single city, and they should be equally defended. And that's why, I love that little statement in the MBR on Hawaii.
You must have slept like a baby last night.
I was too excited but this is like, hey, that was like the hardest Super Bowl ticket you could ever
Isn't
get.
That
to me, that's why, it was so,
yeah.
And like you said, it's only come along. I think there's only been three presidential statements publicly, maybe two, other than this one, over 40 years.
Yeah,
so
amazing.
This was historic. It's rolled out. There's no anti. I mean, like you mentioned, which is and these before the one we did with George W. Bush 20 years ago, there was tremendous fight against it. Reagan had more fight against it. I don't see the fight today. There's no fight here because they see that the threat is real. They see what China is doing in India. They see what Russia's doing. The American public aren't questioning that.
I got a brand new a new nickname for you. From now on, let it be known that Riki Ellison is front row. Remember Euchre? You're not in the Euchre seats. Riki is front row. Hey, listen, my friend. I know it was. We could go on for hours on this. We need to get together. We need to really make people here in Hawaii understand how much is going on for them in their favor. We keep this Kauai facility.
And for Indo-PACOM right there.
Yeah.
And for Pac Fleet. It's all there. They got some of the policy they need to be able to better deter our Pacific adversaries and put systems in there that can defend our troops forward, our allies forward, and most of all, Guam, Hawaii, and the continental United States.
There you go. Hey, Riki, I want to thank you so much for joining us today. We got to make a date. We got to talk football next week. That's coming up right around the corner. We got lots of stuff going on, my friend. Great job,
Mike,
yesterday.
this wouldn't be special, and I'm so glad I got a chance to talk to your show and to you on a historic moment like this.
Yeah, we got to.
Thanks for
Count this one among the blessings, my friend. Have a great weekend, Riki. We'll see you soon.
Okay, thanks.
Hello, there you go. Riki Ellison, the Missile Defense Advocacy Alliance. You go Google missile defense and you're going to find Riki.